Wanted to ask a little bit about world building. There is a glossary in the back of Kelcie Murphy, which I love because it's a nice reference for things that aren't real but could be, but should
Yeah.
be maybe. Is that a glossary? Did that grow out of your notes and your world building? Or how do you go about keeping track of your world, especially for something where you're going to have at least 3, potentially 4 books?
I have a wonderful editor who helps me too. In this particular situation, I crafted the glossary with the stuff that was taken out of mythology. And then I broke it out separately so that the stuff that I invented too, because it's always hard to remember all the words. And when I look in the back of a lot of glossaries, they seem kind of like, I mean, they're all just, ripped out of the real mythology. And I wanted to make it kind of fun and add in these things that I invented. So like the language of Fomorian and, different things that were iconic things that would continue to be a part of the world as the books continue, like the straddles, which are the trees that they travel in as transport trees, and the silver bow, which is actually a part of Irish mythology, that the fairies had to they gave you a silver bow, otherwise you couldn't get into the other world. But those will continue to be a part of the story and into the lands of winter. So anything that I felt like was a iconic thing in the story that would relate. So I'm just going to keep adding to it, as we, because it's kind of fun. But yeah, I did that. They asked me for a glossary, but I wanted to do a glossary that was more than just about the Irish mythology in it. I wanted to sort of have everything in it. So eventually somebody could learn to count in Fomorian, So.
That make you a bit nervous, and maybe it doesn't, but it will after I ask this question. But does it make you a little bit nervous having now that book 1 is published and you've written book 2, but you've got 1 to 2 more books still to go? Do you worry that you've set something in stone in terms of the world, in terms of the mythology already published, and now you can't change it, and when you might have liked to have changed it come book 3 or whatever?
No, I've thought through a lot of the pieces of the puzzle. Like as a good example, one of the things that comes up in book 2, which you can kind of think about, is that, Kelcie didn't have a last name when she got to the human world. She was Kelcie. She only remembered her name was Kelcie. And so somebody else gave her a last name. Her caseworker does, which she explains. But there's a reason for that, which you'll discover in book 2 has more to do with Fomorians. And when you discover who her parents are, neither of them have last names either. So it's sort of those kinds of things have all been laid in on purpose. And anything else, I feel like I can always write my way out of if I get my, you know what I mean? I don't know if I have it all completely ironed out exactly like some other authors, but I have I wrote the outlines. I do my best to do outlines, and then halfway through I throw them out. And in fact, with book 2, I started it in one place, and half of everything I wrote in the first draft got moved to book 3, and I had to redo the whole thing. Not redo, but add the whole thing, because it was moving too fast and the story needed to slow down. And so the storyline is exactly the same. It's just the place the story begins is different. The first probably 70 pages. And as the war escalates, which it does throughout each of the books, that's something I hadn't quite anticipated the flow of when I started. How quickly are these things going to come on? Because sometimes I tend to write things at a breakneck pace, the action, just keep it moving, keep it moving, keep it moving. But there are times too when, especially in this storyline, a little bit in book 2, where especially in the beginning, we need to have action, but also world building that paces in at a comfortable level and not too fast. So
do you have a rule of thumb to know when you're hitting the right pace for that?
No, I mean, I'm sure an author would say, oh, action on every other page, or action, especially in middle grade. But for me, I do like, if I can, every chapter, because chapters in middle grade, they try to keep them really short so that they don't get, because, a lot of times kids are reading a chapter at a time, and they only have so much time to read. So like, 10 pages or less is typical with what we try to do, not do like a long 20-page chapter in middle grade. And so in that 10 pages, I always like to have a big revelation or an action sequence. So I try very, in every scene, otherwise, there's no massively talking scenes without it being tense on the page, I guess is the way to phrase it. Because in order to, even with me, I tend to be someone who likes to get dragged into a story and just wrench all the way till I get to the end, so it's probably why I write the same way. So that's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot of scenes where we're, sitting around in Chalwell Woods and she's, cooking with her grandmother. So she's more or less being attacked by vampires, but whatever.
I was gonna say, if there was that scene, I'd be waiting for the fairies to show up. Oh no.
yeah there's a lot of darkness, and it's interesting because in Irish mythology there's also they had they believe, well, I don't know if this is all true, but this is what the Irish would say. They had the first vampire in their mythology, a guy who they believed was a vampire. And they had headless horsemen. They had a lot of really interesting characters that are so much fun to play with, especially in the kids' crazy world of things. But yeah, I don't think I'd want to have to live in Chalwell Woods. That's all I have to say.